3, 2, 1, go.
So firstly, this is a 3D sphere. This is a mesh. So this is what shows up. You'll see this grid as well. And this grid just kind of shows you where you are, like in space. So for example, you hit front. This is the front of the sphere. If you don't see that, then you might have to hit grid. So anytime I sculpt, there's two things that I make sure that I do. Tap this little camera and make sure you're in orthographic. That way things don't look distorted. Also, tap this little sun here. And right now we're in lit PBR. So lit PBR is great if you want to color it. See, this is white. But for sculpting, just use a matte cap. And I use PXG clay. If you tap it, there's a bunch of them. The first one, PXG clay. So I'm not going to get too deep into the size of things, like the resolution of this sphere. Like everything that makes up this sphere is like, the more dense it is, the higher that this number will be. So you don't want it to go super, super high. We're not going to worry too much about it. I'll try to keep the number low. If it goes real high, it could cause Nomad to crash and the file will be really big, just like anything else. So if I mention the size of whatever it is, it's just this number here. The sphere is 98.3K vertices or polygons, whatever. So this is the number. So the tricky thing about starting with Nomad is you have a sphere and it's already validated. What does that even mean? So when you add a shape in Nomad, it asks you if you want to validate it. Let's go here. So this is our scene menu. So the scene is where all your shapes will show up when you add them. So let's just delete this. So we have our sphere here. We'll just delete it. So now let's add a new sphere. So we go add sphere. So now we have a new sphere here. And you notice that it's yellow. And you see this little thing here. So right now you can only use these shapes, and you see this little word that says primitive. That means this shape is a primitive. That's just a simple shape. A primitive is just a simple shape. You can't really use a lot of the tools unless you validate it. So I know it's a bit confusing. Just remember, when you add a shape, you have to hit validate. And now all these tools show up. It might be like this. Remember, you can tap this. But this is all the tools. I have some extra tools here. You don't have to worry about it. There's a bunch of tools that are default. And let's also name our shapes. It's good to name shapes as you're working. So you just tap these three little dots. And again, we're just in the scene menu right here. You tap these three little dots and you have these little options, name, and we'll just name it body. Anytime I'm making a character, the first thing I do is make some sort of platform that the character is standing on. So let's do add, but let's do a box this time. We'll do a box. So now we've added a box. So when you take your finger and you kind of move it around, you can see the box obviously from all angles. We haven't validated yet. Notice this little thing turns. So again, this is just so you don't get confused, because when you're doing all this, it's easy to kind of get confused and you think that this is the front and it's not. So you have to go to front. So that's how you know you're on the front. When you're making a platform, see all these little like nodes? So those all will move this, but I'm not going to use those. And this is a good point to tell you how to undo. So there's a little arrow here that you can undo, but most of the time you just take 2 fingers and you just tap and it will undo. And 3 fingers is redo. So you can use these little things to kind of move it around, or you can use the gizmo. So tap the gizmo, and the gizmo is like your controller. So this is how you control all your shapes. So anytime you're on the box or a sphere, the gizmo will always kind of look like this. It'll have an arrow, little sphere, all these little things. So we'll go through that. But for right now, let's hit front. We're using our gizmo, and let's squash this together. So to squash it, we'll use this little green dot right here. So we'll just squash it. Just like that. Okay, now you can see our sphere. So let's make it a little bit bigger. So to make it bigger, we're going to use this orange ring around it. It's kind of hard to see. but that's how we're going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, let's hit front again. And this is just a rule of thumb that I always do. See this red line? That's like the horizon line. So that'll be like the perfect place for the floor. So what I do is I move it down using the arrow, and I just line it up with that red line. So that way, if I'm making a character and he's standing on this thing, later on, if I bring it to Blender or something, it's like right where it's supposed to be. So it's just something that I always do. So I have to pass that along. Okay, so our platform, you can see it kind of looks funny. And our sphere is very smooth. And this is something that a lot of people run into. So if your sphere looks like, let's see, where is it? Let's go down to off. So if your sphere looks like this, like a disco ball, then it might just be that you don't have smooth shading on. So you have to go, where was I? So you go to this little circle icon, you see the material on top. So just go down to these options and see how now I have mine off, on, and auto. So for me, auto is on. Apparently some people, auto is off, but that's what that is. So if it's off, it'll look like a disco ball no matter what you do to it. I keep in mine on auto, which is on. That's why it looks smooth. Same thing with this. If you go to the same place and do off, then it just looks like a box with sharp edges. But for now, I'm just going to leave mine on auto because we're going to just round out these sides. This is just something that I always do. Just tap the gizmo, tap the 3 little dots, and post subdivision, just kind of drag up to 2. And the edges are they're a bit round, and that's what I like. You can kind of play with this. You can bring the topology down to 20. Why not? We'll just validate it now. So now we have like a box, but it has rounded edges. Just looks nice. Okay, so let's move our sphere. So in order to move the mesh, just remember that you want to tap on the mesh that you want to work on. Okay, I'll just zoom out a little bit. And obviously this is just like a cell phone. You can zoom out, zoom in, scroll, kind of thing. So I'll zoom out and I'll use this arrow. Make sure you're on the sphere, and I'll move it up. Okay, so now we have sphere and floor. So let's go to our scene and let's just make sure we rename this box. So we go to the box, tap, name, floor. Okay, so now we have a floor and the body. Now your Nomad Sculpt might auto save. You might see it pop up. I don't use that. So if you want to save, just go to the little folder and then save, and you might have to name your project. And I'll put Crash Course January 24. Okay, so now we're saved. So just make sure you save often because sometimes Nomad can crash. So most characters and things we make, we want to use symmetry because that just makes it really easy. So if we're making a body, we can stretch up one side and it'll be symmetrical on the other side. So right now our sphere is it's still in the center of our project. See the red line and the green line, where those come together, this is world center. So this is the center of the project. This sphere, it also has a center, but it's not the center of the project. It's the local center. So any shape that you make is always going to have its own local center. Just in case I have to use those terms, I just want you to know the difference. This is world center, the center of the whole project. And each object, no matter where you move them, it'll always have its own center. Okay, so let's say we want to make this into a body. Let's use the move tool. So we use the move tool. Once you tap the tool, there's a bunch of options up here that you can go through and play around with, but we're not going to get into that now. We'll just kind of play around with the tools. So the move tool, you see these 2 red nodes, and the reason why they're on both sides is because right now it's using the symmetry. So just pretend there's a symmetry line down the middle. So whatever I do here is going to happen on the other side. Sometimes it's easier to be able to see the symmetry line, because you can choose from the X symmetry, Y symmetry, Z symmetry. Let's go back to the move tool. Let's tap on our sphere. So you can see the two little dots. So here's the first thing. You can turn that off. If you turn it off, now you can see it's only on one side. So that's turning symmetry off. So you go to here, this is the symmetry option. You notice that this is the same. So if you tap on here, then you have all of these symmetry options. You notice it's not enabled, and that will change. So now you have X, Y, and Z. And now you can see this red line, and that's because we're in the symmetry tab. When I get out of it, you don't see it. I like to be able to see it all the time. So you just go back into symmetry, scroll down, and turn that on. Now you can see your symmetry line. So whatever you do here is going to happen on the other side. And of course, if you change it, turn X off and turn Y on, here's where it can be really confusing. And I'll just use this as a way to show you what I was saying before. So right now we turned on Y and we turned the symmetry on, but notice that we don't see any green line. And that's because it's using the world. So the world center is here. It's not the center of this. So if you ever do it and it doesn't show up and you're like, why isn't my symmetry line working? Just go back here and use local. So now it's using the center of the sphere instead of the center of the whole project. Now when I tap on it, now it's the top and the bottom. If I tap on Z, then it's the front and back. So I just go back to X, turn Z off. This is usually the default. So let's just make a quick little kind of a body. I'm going to turn it to the left side. And we'll just use move. And maybe we'll put the radius up. So this is the intensity and this is the radius. So my intensity is around like 55. The radius is about like 320. And you can see kind of how big this is. But that's okay. So we're looking at the left side, and let's just pull this up a bit. And then let's go to our gizmo, and let's just make it so it's a little bit like thinner. So something like that. So now let's look at the front, and we have this sort of shape. And the nice thing is everything is symmetrical. So if you wanted to use move and you wanted to make it a little more like a teardrop, you can do that. If you want to make it a little wider, you can do that. So you can just play around with it. But how do I want I think I want my body to be more like this. Yeah, maybe something like that. Maybe the back, maybe we'll pull out the back a little bit, maybe pull out his little belly. Yeah, so something like that. You can just have some fun with it. I always think about it in shapes. So let's say we want to use something for the head. So let's go to the scene and let's add. We'll use a sphere. Okay, so here's our sphere. Let's just validate it right off the bat in Gizmo. So we'll move it up. Let's make it bigger using that orange ring, like so. And maybe we'll use the move tool as well. We'll use symmetry. We'll hit front. And now we can use the same thing. We can use the move tool on the head. We can kind of shape it. And remember, if you want to go to the symmetry and maybe you want to use two symmetries, so then it'll kind of just, move it any way that you want. Maybe I do like a pill-shaped head. But maybe I want the head to come out a little bit more in the back. So I need to turn X off. Otherwise, it's just going to happen in the front. So I need to go here and turn Z off, excuse me. If I turn Z off, then I can, I have a little more control with the head. I think that looks pretty good. And I don't want him to fall backwards. So I'm going to take the head, use Gizmo, and I'll just move it up so it's a little more balanced on the body. You can use like shapes like the sphere and cylinder, whatever, to do legs. But let's use the tube tool as well. So the tube tool is right here. Oh, yours might be somewhere else, but let's use path. We're going to turn snap off. So we just want path. B-spline is fine. So we're just going to use the path. So in order to use the path, I'll just show you an example. So don't do this yet. So I'm just going to lay the Apple Pencil down, drag, lift up, move to another point, place it down, and then drag, and so on and so forth. So that's how you add a path. And then once you add that path, you press this, and then you have your tube there. And you can, obviously, you can move it like this using the nodes. You can add more nodes if you want. You can take them away by dragging them together, or you can tap on them and then they'll be like sharp. So let's just delete this one. If I want it to be a leg, I'll just take tube, path. Maybe the leg starts here. Maybe that's like the knee area, and then I'll add another one down here. Tap that. Turn it sideways, and then I'll just make sure that this is kind of how I want it to be. Move these over. His body's a little bit long. Maybe I want to tap on the body and use move and just kind of move it up a little bit, like so. Maybe make it a little bit smaller so I can just kind of, yeah, something like that. Looks good. And now let's go back to our tube. So I'll tap the tube. And notice we didn't validate it yet. And this is the only time where it's good to not validate right away, because once you validate, you lose that editability. That's such a hard, I always have to like prepare for that word. But then you can't edit it the same way you do before. It just becomes a shape. So I'm going to hit undo. So when you're using a tube, don't validate right away. Use all of these tools. So let's say we want this part of the leg smaller and this part of the leg bigger. We don't want it just a straight tube. So then you would use the radius. Right now there's only one little black node. You tap it. Now there's two. So let's say we wanted to make this part bigger. We could do that. Maybe we want this a little bit bigger. We can do that. We can lift it up a little higher. We can put a little bend in there. And if you can also add other nodes. So if you want to, change the shape a little bit, you can do that as well. I think that looks pretty good. And also you can hit radius again, and then you can edit each one. So then you can edit like the very bottom one. You can edit the knee area, and it'll try to not affect the other ones, but of course it'll affect them a little bit. But you have a lot of freedom to make the tube tool exactly how you want it. I'll make this a little big. Maybe I'll pull it inside a little bit. A little too far up, he would fall backwards. So I'm going to tap Gizmo. So the reason why it's pointing down is because it's always going to stick to whatever the shape is. However you move it, it's going to be pointing that way. So it's going to stay local. But if I just want to move it straight back, here's a little trick. Align. Tap align, and then you can move it straight back. And once you're done, I'll tap align again. Now I'm looking at it, I want it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm just gonna make it a little bit bigger like this. I kind of want to make some toes on it. So let's just add a sphere. So this tube is the leg. It's good to name those. So we were back in our scene, tube, name, leg. Okay, and let's go ahead and validate it. So if you don't see the validate, if you're on your leg, just tap up here and then all these options come up and tap validate. So now we have our leg. So let's add a sphere. And we want to put the sphere on the front, so we need to make it smaller. We can just hit validate first. So let's move it over. Let's make it smaller. Okay. And I'm going to put it in the front. We'll move it back. Maybe we'll squash it a little bit, like so. And it's okay that it's, you know, a little bit bigger. You can either make it wider, or you can just, you know, you can leave it, or you can hit move, and then you can sort of just drag it. As long as you have the cylinder selected, and you can kind of drag it like this. So now he has a little foot. And here's a good point to tell you about the trim tool. So here's trim. Okay, and we have the little rectangle, which is, I always use rectangle. And when you're using the rectangle, all you do is go like this, and whatever's in the white will get trimmed. So let's say the toes, we don't want the toes popping down, so we'll just make a rectangle right up to the edge, maybe a little bit underneath. I don't go up to the edge because it'll look ugly, it'll leave a bad seam. So I go right underneath, and now this is cut. So if I hit solo, you'll see that it's cut. But also the leg looks bad too. So if I hide this, if I hide the floor, see, that leg is not looking good. So make sure you're on the leg, make sure you're on trim, rectangle. So let's trim it. And go right underneath again. Boom. Now everything is trimmed, looks good. Okay, so for arms, let's say we want to use the tube as well. We'll use path, we'll use front. Okay, we'll start here, boom, lift, boom, maybe something like that. And we'll hit that. So now we have a tube for the arm. Maybe we want the arm going forward a little bit. And this one going into the body. And of course, you can adjust it as you like. So I think for this one, I'm going to use the radius 3 times. So now we can edit all of these, and maybe we'll make it, I don't usually do arms that are like bigger at the, yeah, I usually do it the opposite way. Let's do it the opposite way. Yeah, we'll do something like that. I like that. Okay, so we'll do something like that. And let's do the other arm as well. So let's hit path again, and we'll start over here. Let's hit front, probably easier. And let's do a second arm, because we can always clone these and flip it over to the other side, but sometimes it's fun if the character isn't completely symmetrical. All right, so we have our other kind of arm here, and it actually followed the same proportions. Yeah, it actually kept the settings, which is a bit interesting. But anyway, let's kind of drag this one in, and we'll do sort of the same thing that we did for the other arm. And sometimes it's a little tricky to maneuver and get things where you want them to go, but you'll get it in time. Just takes getting used to the controllers and stuff. Okay, that looks good. His arms are a bit big. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Make the arms a little bit smaller. Okay, I like this one out, but I think I want to put this one down. So let's put this one down. And I want to put this one up like he's holding something. So that's pretty good. Maybe we'll move it out a little bit. Again, like I said, it just takes a lot of like maneuvering to kind of get it where you want. But okay, that's good. All right, so let's go ahead and validate these arms. And let's make sure that we name them arms. So we'll go here, tube. This is arm A. I don't even know which one this is. Okay, so that's that one. This one would be arm B. Or arm up. Maybe that's easier. Sphere is the toes. So let's just rename that toes. We have the leg. We have the toes. So let's join the legs and the toes. So we have the legs and the toes. Let's select them both. And then go here, voxel, and then remesh. So we're going to move the resolution up to about 150. And this is going to turn both of those pieces, those meshes, into one mesh. So we hit remesh. Okay, and then it looks like this. I'm going to save. Okay, so now I'm going to take smooth. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and then I can smooth both of those shapes, and they'll look a little bit better once they're smoothed out together. Okay, looks pretty good. I'm going to move it down a little bit. You notice that when we smoothed it, it kind of raised it up. So I'm going to move it back down like so. So it looks like he's standing. Okay, so let's add some little fingers to his hands. So for that, let's use inflate. Okay, so first, before we do it, the arms they're very small. So we just need to give them a little bit more density, because when we try to use inflate, it'll work, but it's not really, see how blocky it is? It's because it's not dense enough. So here's how we'll do it. We'll take each of these arms and we'll voxel remesh at like 150. Okay, let's go ahead and smooth this arm out now. Okay, so we'll smooth that out. Let's take this arm. We'll do the same thing. We'll voxel remesh it at 150. Oh, and I'm using, this is just a shortcut. It's the same thing as going here, voxel, and remeshing at 150. I'm just so used to using the shortcut that sometimes I forget. But anytime I go down here and I talk about voxel remeshing, you can go here and do it this way. But it's the same. So if I move this, this moves as well. Okay, we'll remesh it and then we'll just smooth it out. Okay, so to add fingers, let's use inflate. And for this hand, let's say we want to do 3 fingers here and 1 finger here. This will be the thumb. So maybe we'll just add the inflate right here. I'll just do a circular motion. And see how it kind of just rises up. And then here along the bottom, let's say I want 3 fingers. So I'm going to do it like this. Another one here. And then another one here. Okay, something like that. Looks good. And then we want to do the same thing with this arm. Okay, where's the thumb? So the thumb would probably be around here. So I'll just use inflate and bring that out. And then the 3 fingers would probably be around here. Notice I'm doing them sort of on the flat side. 3, 1, 2, 3. If this gets in the way, you can always just hit solo. 1, 2, 3. Should be pretty good. Let's solo again. That may take some practice. Obviously, you know, I've been doing this a long time. but hopefully you kind of get the gist of what I'm doing. If you need little adjustments, like this thumb is a little wonky, you can probably use like drag. Just use drag, and if it's, you can adjust the size, and then you can sort of just make sure you tap on whatever you want to work on, and then you can sort of just move these a little bit and move your shapes a little bit. I want them to be nice and round. So now that we added inflate, anytime you're like manipulating the clay, it's just going to make it softer and more malleable. So sometimes when you manipulate the clay a lot, like we have here, you know, we've stretched out the clay to make the fingers, then sometimes it's good to voxel remesh again, because voxel remesh will recalculate all of the things that make up this shape, and it'll just make it a little bit more solid after you manipulate it. So I'm just going to do a quick save, and then I'm just going to save both of these again at 150. So we'll go voxel 150, and then here we'll do the same thing, voxel 150. So now when you smooth, these should just kind of smooth out nicely, and they won't lose as much shape as they might if you don't do this. Okay, looks good. We'll just go back here and just smooth out these little fingers. Nice. Let's go ahead and make the other leg. Anytime you're making something, an ear or something, and you want it to go on the other side, this is how you do it. Just tap scene. Here's our leg. We want to use what's called a repeater. So we go add, and we go down here to mirror. So when you tap mirror, it's just going to mirror this leg. So it's really just one leg, it's just mirrored. Okay, so we don't really need to, like, and if you use the gizmo, you can like make them wider apart or whatever. You know, you can kind of adjust them a little bit. Just tap on the mirror and validate the whole mirror. Join children. Now we have two legs. So let's just name it legs. Okay, let's give him some sort of face. I want to make the face a little bit more flat. So I'll just use move, tap on the head. I want to use my symmetry so we can keep it sort of flat. And I'm just going to kind of push this in a bit. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. The reason why I'm making it bigger is so it's just more of a smoother movement across the whole head. Okay, so that's pretty good. It's just a little bit more flat. Let's add some eyes. First I add like an eye socket, and it kind of tells me where I want the eye to go. So if we're going to start manipulating this, I just want to make the shape a little more dense. So let's go voxel, and let's remesh around 150. Okay, so we'll remesh that. You can see it's a little disco ball-y, or you can smooth it out now, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, let's use crease, and let's actually draw our eye out. So we're using the crease tool. I have the radius at like 55, intensity is all the way up. Symmetry is on. So let's say we want them here. So maybe we want them something like that. So this gives me a nice, a way to see where I want the eyes. And I actually really like that. So we use the clay tool, and this adds clay, but it can also take clay away. So if you hit sub, instead of adding, it'll take it away. So I'm going to bring this down. Maybe I'll put the intensity up a little bit. Bring the radius down, but you can play around with that. We essentially just want to kind of dig out this, use this for an eye socket. So we're just kind of, yeah, something like that. And we have symmetry on, so we don't have to do it on both sides. It's going to do it on both sides automatically. Great, perfect. So we really like this shape, so I'm just going to voxel remesh it again at 150. And then I'll just take smooth, and you just want to smooth this out. So let's use spheres for the eyes. So we'll go here, add, sphere. Okay, we don't want to validate it yet. Let's use the gizmo, and we'll move it up, and we'll move it over. Okay, and maybe you want to turn it, and we just want to bring it up so you can kind of see it. So just make it smaller and fit it in that shape. So we'll make it smaller. And it's also good to make it a little bit flatter as well. So you use this blue sphere to make it a little bit more flat. So then we'll move it back into that eye socket. But now you have to maneuver it so it's like flat. You want to move it over so it's like right in the middle. So you just want to adjust it. Let's tap Gizmo and let's hit mirror here. So we'll hit validate. So now let's take move, make it really small. And now let's try to just move this sphere so it fits in the shape. Another cool thing that I like to do is take your flatten tool, tap on the head, and I like to flatten out this area above the eye. I just think it looks good, so I always like flatten that out. Let's say we want a big mouth that goes into the head. I always like to make just big mouths. I like making teeth. So we'll take mask. You want to make sure that you're on the head. We're going to use the mask tool. Okay, and we'll use symmetry. And now you see our dots. And you can make the mouth as big as you want. So maybe we'll start back here and go like this. And maybe we'll make it a little bit wider. Or you can go ahead and make it really wide. Like that. I think that's good. And if you want, you can add some cheeks. Maybe we'll use inflate. You can add some cheeks like around here. Something like this. Make them a little bigger if you want. Okay, something like that. Smooth it a little bit. We've masked off this part. So what we want to do is invert it so that we're masking the whole head. So we go here, the mask tool options, invert. So now everything is dark except for the mouth. Okay, so now we'll tap the gizmo, and now we can use the gizmo to just move this back. Okay, it's not going through the other side. You don't want to go too far and have it go through the other part of the head. We don't want that. So that looks pretty good. So now we'll go back to the mask, go back to the mask options, and clear. So that's going to clear that mask. So that looks good. And let's voxel remesh it around 150 again. And then we can go ahead and smooth the mouth. We'll expand a little bit. Sometimes it's fun to use move and kind of just give him a little bit of like a nose type thing, rather than just have it flat. Just gives a little bit of something. Oh, and let's start naming these things too. So this is the head. And these are the eyes. I'm going to name the mirror eyes. Okay. And the sphere that's the eyes as well. I'll just leave that. Okay, so let's give him some teeth. So I'm going to tap on the body because I don't want to add the teeth because it'll automatically go into this mirror. I don't want that. So I'm just going to hit the body and then add a sphere. Gizmo, up, forward, shrink, and then we'll just squash it with this little blue node. And now we can hit mirror. And then once we hit mirror, we go back to our gizmo. It's kind of weird because gizmo is like grayed out. You can hardly see it, but it actually is there. So then we just move them away from each other because they're mirrored now. Okay, so I want them to be a little bit flatter, so I'm going to squash them. Oh, I actually really like that. I'll squash them a little more this way. So now I'm just going to use, see how there's like a curve in the mouth? So I'll move these up, and then I'll just curve these this way using this green ring. I think that looks pretty good. And if you want to add more, so now we have our teeth. They're in a mirror because we hit mirror. Remember, we hit a mirror here. So they're in a mirror. So let's rename this teeth. And this is our, let's just name this T1 because that was the first tooth we did. But you can clone it. If you tap these three dots and hit clone, now you have more teeth. So we'll hit gizmo, and now we can just rearrange these other teeth like this. Maybe we'll use the green ring. We want to keep that nice curve going. So the teeth look nice and real. And let's see, do we want to make them, sometimes it's fun to make the teeth a little bit different. You know, something like that. Okay, let's add a tongue now. So let's go back to body. We'll add, let's do we'll do another sphere. We'll hit gizmo, we'll bring it up and forward. So let's just shrink it. So now for a tongue, what I usually do is shrink it like this, but I also pull it out like this. So then I actually use mirror. So I'll go to gizmo and I'll move them out a little bit, and then I'll take this green ring and then I'll put them into each other like that. And sometimes I'll even just tilt it a little bit so you get that nice like shape here, almost like a heart shape. So that's what I'm going for. So now I'm just going to validate both of these together. I'll tap on the mirror and I'll validate join children. That just means that both of these mirrors are going to become one thing. So I'll hit yes. I'll rename this tongue. Okay, so now I just want to smooth the front, because anytime you voxel remesh, sometimes it can look a little messy. But now it's just one piece. So if you're using your gizmo and you're like, where's my gizmo? If that ever happens and you're like, the piece is here, the gizmo's nowhere to be found, go pivot, center, pivot. Because sometimes the pivot can just run away randomly. So it's good to know. Okay, so now we'll place the tongue. Maybe we want it a little bit wider. Tilt it forward a little bit. Move it back a little bit more. So now he's got his little tongue in there. And let's say you're like, the tongue goes into the back of the head. It looks weird. What you can do is hit layer, sub, symmetry, because now we want to do that on the head. So we tap the head. You can make this a little bit bigger. And layer is kind of an interesting tool. So with layer, it just gets rid of like a whole layer. And the only way you can have it go deeper is if you let go, if you bring the Apple Pencil on, and then you can have like a deeper level like that. Okay, looks good. Let's smooth it. So now it looks like there's a little more of a throat. Okay, and maybe you want teeth. Maybe you want your teeth to be on the top and the bottom. So that's another easy thing that we can do. So let's take T1. So let's clone T1 again. And let's use our gizmo. And now we'll bring this down. And then we can just kind of place it wherever we want it. Maybe I'll bring them forward a little bit, bring them, actually they look pretty good as they are. I like that. Maybe right about there. And we can do the same thing with the other one. If we want T1, we can just clone it. Now we have T3, but that's fine. We'll move it down. back. Maybe back a little bit further. Something like that. And maybe you can hit clone here too. That's just a shortcut. Maybe you want like another one on the bottom, since we can see more of the bottom teeth. Maybe you just want to make it like another little small tooth there. And if it gets hard to maneuver, remember, you can take it off of a line, and sometimes that's easier, sometimes it's harder, but just remember that you have that option. So we'll have his other little teethies maybe here. I feel like they need to be a little bit closer. They look a little too far away from me. And this one, I feel like I want it to be a little bit more sharp like that. But now I also feel like I need it on the top. So I'm just going to clone this and just move it up. Yeah, something like that. So now we have some nice little teeth. Okay, how much time do we have? Okay, so let's maybe put some ears on him. He kind of has a big head here. Let's add some ears. So for ears, let's see. Add, and we'll do some spheres again. I love using spheres. We'll use Gizmo. And you can tell I didn't even mirror them, but they're mirrored. So that means that they went into this teeth mirror. So that's what I was talking about. So all you do is long press and drag it out, and you're good. So we can rename this ear. So now we should just have this one ear. And usually with the ears, I kind of flatten them like this. And then we can just figure out where we want to put his ear. Maybe I'll bend it back a little bit. And move it back. Oops. Here's another good thing if I want to use a line, because I just want to move it straight back. Ooh, I kind of like the ears. It's kind of interesting. So I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and mirror it. So now he has 2 ears. I'll validate them. And now we can just kind of use move, and we can maneuver them. So like say we want this a little bit longer. This ear here, we can do that. And let's say it's fun to add. Let's do this. Let's take this ear, let's clone it, and let's use our gizmo, and we'll move it up and make it smaller. So that's a good way to have like the ear, but then also have like I call it an ear puff. And it's just like a nice way to have another little part to the ear. Notice the ears are showing through the face, which is not good. So I'm going to take trim. Let's use the lasso this time, and let's just trim the ear. So we're on this part here. So we'll just trim it like that. Wait, what happened? Okay, let's try that again. Okay. Now we'll trim this part. Make sure I didn't trim the actual ear. Okay, yeah, it still looks good. I can still see a little bit of ear. So another thing you do, you can take clay and sub, and then you can just kind of make it go away. So let's give him some little horns, right? I always like horns. Let's just use tube. We'll use path like we have been. We'll just start up here. We'll do something like that. That's kind of actually interesting looking. So I'm going to add another node here. And notice that we must have added it in a mirror already. I'm going to take this tube out and put it up top. And I'll rename it horns. Okay. And if we want, we can go ahead and mirror it. That's fine. The only thing about that is sometimes it can be a little confusing with them both there. So sometimes I just work on this one, and then when I'm done, I'll mirror it. So this might be cool if maybe it's like goes in like that, and then it comes out. That's kind of interesting. I'll do radius 3 times. I'll make this, I'll make that bigger. Maybe this is a little bit bigger. And maybe this kind of comes out like that and is a bit smaller. Remember, you can add some more if you want. I kind of want mine to be a little bit bigger down here, so I'm just gonna, whoops, I'm just gonna increase this size. There we go, something like that. Whoops, something like that. I use the gizmo to kind of get it in a position that I really like. I just think it should be a little bit further back, maybe. Yeah, something like that. I think that looks good. I could make this, if I tap on here and I go to this little tube, I can go back to the tube options. I could make this sharp, but I don't always like it sharp. Sometimes I like it kind of rounded. So that's why I might just leave it a little bit rounded like that. Mirror, validate. They look good. I'm gonna go to this mirror, validate it, join children. So now we have our 2 horns. Okay, I'll take smooth. I'm gonna turn on symmetry. The reason I have to turn on symmetry now is because they're not mirrored anymore. It's just one piece. So I have to use symmetry. Okay, so now when I smooth, it should smooth both of them. Yeah, exactly. So what I like to do is use inflate on the head. And I just like to add some, you know, kind of gives it like a place where it comes out, makes it look a little bit more natural. I do it around the ears sometimes too. So maybe just like, maybe a little bit smaller. But inflate is a great tool for this, but I always, I'll add it, and then sometimes I'll just smooth it out, just so it looks a little bit more subtle. But I think that looks pretty cool. Okay, so now let's give him some pupils. So we'll go here, add sphere, and now we'll take the gizmo and we'll move it up, forward. We'll move it over to one eye and shrink. Okay, and we want to make this a little bit flatter. We don't want it too much like a ball. So we'll make it flatter. That looks good. Now it's a little bit tricky because you have to maneuver it so it's more on the surface of the eyeball. So sometimes you have to just do a little maneuvering. And it can be a bit tricky. But you kind of want it to just be round and right on the surface of the eye. I'm going to tap on the eye and then use smooth, because smooth will sometimes take away some mass. So I'm going to use smooth so I can slowly just take away the mass from the eye so that the pupil is what shows there. So I'm just going to go ahead and shrink it a little bit so it kind of fits. Let's mirror, validate. There we go. Okay, so remember, now it's mirrored. So this is the mirror here. We can name it, I usually call pupils P1 for some reason. And just remember, if you want to adjust, like if I want to work on this one, I have to press the sphere and not the mirror. It looks cute. So last but not least, we'll use the tube for little eyelashes. My favorite thing to do. So we'll use path. We'll turn snap on because we want to stay on the surface. So maybe we'll start here and we'll drag and we'll just make the shape along the top of the eye. And maybe I'll put a little tip on the end and make this. Sometimes I do a little something like that. Hit green. I don't know why I talk like this. I apologize. So we can go ahead and mirror it. So now we want to use our radius. So I think 2 is good for now. We'll make this bigger. And we'll make this smaller. Okay, I'll just use radius and because I want to make these a little bit bigger too. Looks good. So now I just want to turn snap off. I'm turning snap off. That way I can bury this part of the eyelash inside the mesh. If we still had snap on, it wouldn't go inside. It would just stick to the surface. It would snap to the surface. And maybe I'll make another one here. And make that one smaller. Sometimes I do a little something like that. Get a nice little curve in there. So let's validate and let's just smooth. Let's smooth this down a little bit. Ooh, we need to take this mirror out of the pupil. And this is lashes or eyelashes, whatever you like. It's good to go through and just make sure that you have everything labeled. I think this mirror is the horns. You can also take the eye. Maybe you feel like there's not enough eye on the bottom. You can kind of go like that. So in the next video, I'll do just lighting and coloring and things like that. And then of course, I'll eventually bring him over into Blender. Oh yeah, the butt. So if you want to add a tuchus, let's just go up to the body, add a sphere. We'll use our gizmo. We'll move it up, back, something like that. We'll go ahead and mirror it. Tap gizmo. We'll separate them. So you got to make your cakes however you want his little bum to be. So we'll go ahead and validate. And now we're going to go to this mirror. Validate. So now we have the mirror, the body, and the legs. Let's bring all those together. First, I'm going to do a quick save. Let's go ahead and voxel remesh all of those together at like 175. So now they're all one shape. Use symmetry. Otherwise, they won't be, it'll look weird. This guy's little butt. I'm going to continue this and I'll do some lighting and stuff like that, but I'll do in another video. I'm trying to keep these under an hour or close to an hour. Keep drawing, keep sculpting. I'll see you all in the next video.
Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to go more in depth, then definitely check out my Skillshare classes where I am a top teacher. I have about 50 classes, both Procreate and Nomad Sculpt. I also have a few classes on Udemy, so if you want to learn more, or you just like my style, you like the way I teach, you want to support me, those are some other places that you can do it. Thanks again, keep drawing, keep sculpting. I'll see you all in the next video.